And I just remember kind of sitting in a big room, hearing folks talk and hearing folks connect to the darkness of their addiction story. And then there was this like voice. I looked up and there you were on the stage, sharing, and you could just feel the passion kind of flowing through you, and the room could feel it. And what really struck me is that the thread that ran throughout it was this hope element, this belief in the resiliency of the human spirit and what we're capable of.
I got sober in the fall of 2011. And during that time, I knew that facing my addiction and learning how to live life without substances was going to be the hardest thing that I've ever done. Just the idea of staying sober for the rest of my life seemed impossible, but I wanted a new life. I wanted to be free. So with every heartbreaking experience, like a breakup, the death of someone I loved, or a time for celebration, getting back into school, or becoming an aunt, I promised myself that using was just not an option. But at 5 years into my recovery, I woke up one morning in my apartment in a level of pain I could see no way out of. And at that time, the one place I felt like I needed to escape, I couldn't. My body had become my bondage. And I knew that even drinking or using wouldn't help ease my pain. But I didn't want to exist. And as I walked towards my kitchen, completely defeated, a picture of my nephew fell off my fridge, and I fell to the floor with it, crying, and picked it up. And it was in that moment I knew that I had to make a new promise to myself, to do whatever it takes to want to live. You're listening to Beauty in the Grit, and I'm your host, Ariel Britt. Reap what you need. In the winter of 2015, I was just over 4 years sober and finishing my graduate degree in social work at the University of Michigan, Go Blue. And when I started looking for jobs, I knew I wanted to work to help build community and programs for young people in recovery. As a person who got sober pretty young, finding those spaces where I could be with other people my age that were experiencing the same things, like, what am I going to do with my life? How do I adult? And how do I stay sober? It was just so impactful on my recovery. And I really just wanted to create more spaces to help young people find their way and have fun. So about 6 months after graduation, I was offered a job at a university down south to coordinate programming for students in recovery. I was so excited and scared, but mostly excited. I packed up all my belongings that I could fit into my white Malibu, shipped the rest, and road trip solo while listening to Country Road Take Me Home on repeat. Once I got there, I dove straight into my work. I loved my students, my colleagues were amazing, and everything was going really well. But part of me definitely felt lonely and uncertain, going from grad school to being a young professional, but I'd moved in my recovery before, and I just trusted that the rest of my life would develop and I would find my own community outside of work in time. After about 2 months of living there, I was sexually assaulted by a person from the university I was working at. And as much as I felt so much anger and fear towards the person who assaulted me, the hardest part of this experience was that I found me beating up myself the most. I was plagued with all these thoughts of how could this happen? Where did I go wrong? I was sober now, so how could I miss this? The shame I felt was so deep and corrosive, and I didn't want to connect with anyone because I felt like I couldn't. I no longer had a clue who I even was, so if I couldn't trust myself, how could I trust anyone else? I didn't feel safe, but with the support of my family and friends, I made the decision to report my assault the following week. The university investigators told me that it would take several weeks, maybe even months, for them to reach a conclusion, and that also there was a chance that he would not be found responsible. This possibility plagued me, and with my family and friends hundreds of miles away, I didn't know if I would be able to survive if that was the case. I felt so helpless and wanted to give up on everything. And if you know me, you know there are very few things that I love more than being an aunt. Being able to watch them grow and spoil them every chance I get is the greatest joy of my life. So when that picture fell from my fridge and I saw my nephew's big cheeks, he's rocking this blue plaid shirt, I knew that I only had one choice: to fight. For the rest of the fall and into winter, I waited to find out if this person would be found responsible for what happened. But during that time, I leaned deeper into the support from my family, friends, and immediate colleagues. I worked hard to connect to other folks in recovery down there and find my own community. I started getting back into my body by working out about 5 days a week at 6 a.m. I started therapy and began healing older wounds that this experience brought up. But what really helped me was that I gave myself permission to feel my pain and to grieve as best as I could. I had to be so gentle with myself while I started learning to share and feel at a level of vulnerability that I'd never experienced before. What happened to me was not my fault. This truth was crucial for me to find in order to get back to feeling like myself, or even a new version of myself, and to feel like I was able to really support my students again. That February, there was an opportunity for me to take a group of students to Colorado for a leadership summit. They were going to ski and snowboard and have a chance to connect with other students in recovery. I knew this was going to be a great experience for them, and I had to make it happen. We got approval, and they were so excited to go. On the morning that we were flying out for the summit, I was getting ready, and I got an email that said the investigation of my case had finally reached a conclusion and a decision had been made. They wanted me to come in that day, and a dear friend of mine cleared her schedule to be able to come with me. I prayed the whole way to campus for a just outcome, for my truth to be enough. But even if it wasn't, I asked to somehow know that I was going to be okay, no matter what the outcome would be. About an hour before the meeting, I received a call from my colleague in Colorado who was putting on the summit. And she said, "Oh, hey, I forgot to ask you. I've been so busy, but I was wondering if you'd be willing to give a keynote about your experience in recovery and as a student to close out one of the evenings." And I just smiled and said, of course. This just felt like an immediate answer to one of my prayers. I knew I'd just been handed a larger purpose to look forward to. The man who assaulted me was found not responsible. I remember walking out of that meeting and feeling completely numb. I sat with my friend on a bench outside of the building. The air was so still, and we sat silently together for a while. And then the questions started churning in me. What was I going to do? Why wasn't my truth enough? Was I ever going to feel safe again? I just knew that I wouldn't be able to work there much longer, but I didn't want to move back home. I just felt so lost. My friend broke her silence and said something that changed me forever. She said, "Ariel, God is not in the details. We are." And what that meant was that this didn't happen because I was bad or I did something wrong or the universe was punishing me. This happened because a man made a terrible decision. And all of us are only responsible for what we do and create in this world. And if I could accept that, if I could believe that, then I would be able to trust in something bigger than all of us to bring in people and experiences into my life to help get me through it. We made it to Colorado that night. My students were having a blast, and the next evening was when I was supposed to give my keynote. That night, the room was filled with about 200 people. I sat anxiously in the back, waiting for my name to be called. And before I walked on stage, I whispered a quick prayer. God, use me. I don't remember what I said, but when I was done, the entire room was standing and applauding. And I don't remember walking off stage, but what I do remember barely is a man wearing a black shirt with the word sober written in white letters across the chest coming towards me to talk. It was Scott Strode.
It's like you could sense that you're striking a match and holding it up for other people so they can come to that light. And even if that match is starting to burn your fingertips, you're still holding it up high for others. And that's something that you don't see all the time in this space. And I just thought, Air's definitely a phoenix rising from the ashes, and she should be part of this whole thing.
Scott Strode is the founder and national executive director of the Phoenix, a nonprofit that offers a sober, active community to anyone with 48 hours of sobriety. The year was 2006.
I have a friend that I used to climb with, and he was in recovery. His name's Ben. And then also Jackie, who's still with the Phoenix, but she and I climbed together in New England. And I realized that when we went out and had those adventures in the mountains or at the cliff, that the more I did that, the less I thought about drinking and using. And at that point, I was maybe about, 4 to 6 years sober. I can't remember exactly when, but, I kept thinking, like, how do we give this to other people? And that's where the story of the Phoenix was sort of born. And I brought a bunch of people together in my living room, and I said, I want to start this nonprofit. We're going to call it the Phoenix. It's going to help people. It's going to be free. We're going to go on all these adventures with them and in this peer-to-peer environment. And everybody just said, good luck, you should do that. And kind of thought, that maybe nothing would come of it. But many of them ended up kind of joining the effort. And some of the first employees were Phoenix, were people in that room. We started in Boulder with a few events. It was a bike ride and an indoor rock climbing. And it grew from that to going to Colorado Springs to work with veterans, gone to Denver to bring Phoenix into the city. And we now have grown into 22 states and over 46 communities. And we're offering all those programs for free to anybody who's 48 hours sober. I think Phoenix's story has had a lot of really magical moments where the right people have come alongside us at the right time, and we're able to help the organization grow. People kind of come along at just the right time, and it seems to amplify the impact and the reach of the organization.
A few months after my trip to Colorado, I got a phone call from Scott. He was looking to develop youth and young adult programs at the Phoenix and wanted me to apply for the job. During my visit to Denver, he took me around to all the neighborhoods, and I remember feeling hugged by the mountains that surrounded us. It felt right. There was a sense of safety that I hadn't felt in a long time. And at the end of my visit, he said, "Welcome home." And I believed him. I moved to Denver almost 2 years ago, and it has been one of the best leaps of faith that I've ever taken. I have healed, I have grown, I've met some amazing people, and it's even illuminated bigger parts of what my work and my purpose will be as I move forward in my career and in my life and in my relationships. And if all goes well, I'll be celebrating 8 years sober this November. Oh, and I now have another nephew that I get to spoil and adore.
Hi, Auntie Ariel. Call me back. Bye.
So to Scott Strode, thank you for seeing something good and beautiful in me during one of the darkest times in my life. You are a light in the details. I am so grateful for my life today, but I'm eager for more. And regardless of what's to come, through the good and the bad, we will rise. This episode of Beauty and the Grit was produced by me, Ariel Britt, mixed and sound designed by Jason Patton. Kat Jaffe was the story editor. This season is funded by Patreon. A special thank you to them and everyone at House of Pod. To find more information about the Phoenix, check the show notes. To the listeners, your support is very much appreciated. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Until next time, and as always, reap what you need.